scripture lesson for today comes from Psalm 46, actually, and this is what it says. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice and the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Come, behold the works of the Lord. See what desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Today, I want to talk just for a few minutes from the topic, worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. It's been 2 years since we, along with people all around this world, have been dealing with global impact of a devastating pandemic. In the United States alone, there have been about 900,000 deaths from COVID-19, and people are still dying every day. Where we once thought we would see an end to this virus, we are now seeing that countries around the world are trying to determine how do we best learn to live with it. What was unimaginable 3 years ago is now being integrated into our everyday lives. I was reading just yesterday in Time magazine where it said COVID-19 is learning to live with us. It might be time we learn to live with it. Many of us, in some of the news stories, talk about how fatigued we are by what we've been going through. I don't know about you, but I feel that way sometimes. Most of us feel that way on some level. We want our old way of life back. We want it to be how it used to be before we heard about this thing called COVID-19. But today I want to challenge us or invite us that instead of lamenting where we are, let's take a moment. I want to take a moment just to commend you, to commend us, because we've all made it through what for many of us have been worst case scenarios. Under a blanket of fear and a blanket of frustration or a blanket of sickness, we've endured job loss, relationship pressures, loss of loved ones, political nonsense, attacks on our democracy, international turmoil, physical and mental health challenges, and the loss of our ability to be carefree and to live life as we had known it for many years. Individually, nationally, and globally, we have endured. So we need to take a moment to reflect on that and realize just how strong and how resilient we've been and how we've been able to make it over these past 2 years. I'm just going to stop for a second and just let you think about that and think about how blessed we've been. Now, while it's good to know that we have endured, it is also important to remember that just as sure as you and I are breathing, we have no guarantee that the worst things in our lives are behind us. Every day brings us new opportunities for growth, but growth usually only happens if something forces us to stretch beyond where we've been. In my home, we have this book. I don't even know where Shauna got this book, but we have this book called the worst case scenario survival handbook. The book provides step-by-step instructions for what you need to do and need to know fast in worst case scenarios. I'll just name a few things that are in this book. It tells you how to escape from quicksand, how to break down a door, how to fend off a shark, how to deliver a baby in the back of a car, how to make fire without matches, how to survive if your parachute fails and doesn't open, and how to survive if your smart home outsmarts you. I don't know if I can remember any of these instructions in the event that something bad or the worst thing happened. But our text for today is a bit easier to remember and ultimately more powerful. Our text comes out of the book of Psalms, and the book of Psalms presents words that have been turned to for generations by diverse people to cover a full gamut of emotions, from joy and praise to complaint to lament. Initially, however, they were for people of Israel, as biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann puts it. The Psalms are helpful because they are genuinely biological literature that expresses both sides of the conversation of faith. On one hand, Israel's faithful speech addressed to God is the substance of Psalms. They articulate the entire gamut of Israel's speech to God, from profound praise to the utterance of unspeakable anger and doubt. On the other hand, they are the voice of the gospel, God's good word addressed to God's faithful people. There are various categories of Psalms, from thanksgiving of an individual or the lament of a community, songs of praise, royal psalms, and others. But our text for today, Psalm 46, is a psalm that falls under the category of a psalm of confidence and trust. It begins with God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Yeah, we hear those words and we think, oh, that's nice. Yeah, that sounds good. God is with us in our times of trouble. We heard that. That's sweet. No, that's not really what it is. Really, when you think about it, it says God is our refuge and strength. It doesn't say God will be. It didn't say God sometimes brings us refuge and strength. It says God is refuge and strength. Refuge is a condition of being safe or sheltered from pursuit or danger or trouble. And strength is our capacity of an object or a substance to withstand great force or pressure. And God is present in our times of trouble. Not just any time of trouble, but God is refuge and strength, not brings us refuge and strength, but is refuge and strength in our times of trouble. God is a worst case scenario kind of God. And the text says, therefore we shall not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. That's kind of describing a worst case scenario. For us, it's like saying we're being hit by a 10.0 earthquake and a Category 5 hurricane all at the same time. Because if you look at ancient Near East worldviews, when they looked at the universe, the mountains were considered the foundations that anchored dry land in the midst of watery chaos, in addition to the mountains being the pillars that held up the sky. Remember, this is way before Columbus, way before we realized that the earth was round. They're thinking what I see is being held up by these mountains. And these mountains are also keeping the water away from me. So the worst case, the worst thing that could happen for them were for the mountains to shake and for them to tremble, because the earth would be threatened below by water and threatened above by the sky falling. It would be as bad as World War III in our time. But for these people in our text, and even for us, even if our world is falling apart, God is still our reliable refuge. God can be trusted to be with us even in the ultimate worst case scenario. The text says, we shall not fear. Now, I don't think that means we should not be afraid. I think that's unrealistic. But, fear is important because it ignites us. It makes us get up and do something in a situation. So, yeah, we need to be afraid a little bit, but we don't need to be paralyzed by fear. We don't need to be terrified by fear because God is still God. And we can trust that God is still surrounding us with grace and with love and will guide us to our ultimate good, even in the worst of situations. This Psalm 46 is significant for worship. It was significant in the time when it was written because it was a liturgy used by the early Christian church of the New Testament. But it's also good for us because one of the things I think that's important about communities of faith is coming together. Liturgy, reading scriptures, coming together reminds us about God. It reminds us that God's not only there for us, but God has been there for other people. Because sometimes I never have experienced what you've been through, but you've perhaps experienced what I might be heading to. But I'm hearing from the community that in the midst of the community, God has been working and God has done something for us. I've mentioned my mother quite a bit, even after her death a couple months ago. But as you can imagine, for me, that was one of my worst case scenario situations. And I also think it's appropriate for us to talk about her because she was a very central part of this community. And we can still learn from her. So I think she wouldn't mind for me to share that, yes, she had her moments of fear, but greater than her fears, she had a very firm awareness that even though she went through a period of what was her worst case scenario, when she had excruciating pain and when her organs were failing, she still, until the very end, had a very firm faith in God. And although I wish I could have had been there or she could have had some family with her as she made her transition, I know that even though she was in an emergency room by herself, I know without a shadow of a doubt that this God we read about, this God in this text, helped her all the way from this reality to the next. And that same God has sustained many of us and has been our refuge and strength in our times of trouble. Think about the many things in your life you've made it through. Those things where you didn't know how you could do it, how you were going to get through it. And even in the rear view, you don't even know how you did it. As Mahalia Jackson said, my soul looked back and wondered how I got over. It's amazing that we got over. It's amazing that we made it through because God was our refuge and was our strength. That presence of God that is always within us was with us as we went through our times of trouble. Susan Taylor said, the seeds of faith are always within us. Sometimes it takes a crisis to nourish, and encourage their growth. That power, that presence is already in us, but sometimes it takes us going through something for us to grow in our awareness of that power. The last thing any of us want to face is a worst case scenario. But being prepared gives us the best chance for survival. In our home, in addition to that book, we also have a go bag. I don't know if you know about a go bag, but it's a bag that includes the physical things we need in case of a worst case scenario, like if a storm hits, or if there's a fire, or if there's violence. There, the go bag has everything you need. Our go bag has a battery operated crank radio. It has cash. It has an emergency blanket. That's usually what you put in there. You put extra batteries in there for the radios. You put in extra keys to your house or to your car. You put in first aid supplies or a flashlight or high powered snacks or all the important documents you need. They're in there in a sealed plastic bag. That's all well and good from a physical perspective, but they won't do you any good if you get paralyzed by fear and you don't make a move. That's where faith comes in, even in the worst case scenario situation. Because we need that faith. It gets us to move. It gives us the courage. I read somewhere faith is the bird that feels the light when the dawn is still dark. It's good to have that go bag, but it's good to have that knowledge that God is with us. Because similarly, when we face our emotional, psychological, or even our spiritual worst case scenarios, we need to have a different kind of go bag. That go bag includes a community of faith that we can depend on. That go bag means we need to have an emergency contact in our go bag. That means we need to have a non-judgmental, ride or die kind of person, somebody, preferably somebody who really loves you and knows you. And with everything they know about you, they love you unconditionally. And they can read you and they can tell when something's wrong. And they can make suggestions like when it's time to get a therapist or go see a therapist. Actually, the therapist ought to be part of your go bag. That when things start to fall apart, you know you can go to your therapist, your psychiatrist, your psychologist. You notice I'm not just saying you need to pray, because prayer is just an ingredient of your go bag. We need that memory of the fact that God has been with us and has seen us through difficult times in our life. We need affirmations in our go bag. We need something like Psalm 47 to remind us that God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. We need to have the assurance that even if the worst case scenario actually manifests, God is still greater than our troubles. You know, I've been in this world for over 62 years, and I've seen some things. Actually, when I was 3 years old, I was alive during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I really remember the duck and cover air raid drills we used to have to go through when I was a child. I remember the civil rights movement. I remember the Vietnam War and the protests and the casualty reports we used to see. I remember 9/11, 2001. I remember the night that the Gulf War started. And I remember what it was like to go through COVID-19, and we're still in it. God has brought us to some things and through some things. And my friends, there'll be more things to come. But my hope and my prayer for all of us is that the worst things that we'll have to face in life are already in your rear view. But I have no guarantee for that. But I can guarantee that no matter what comes, I'm glad to know that we have the assurance of a refuge and a strength that's already in us that helps us to make it through as we hear God in us and around us saying to us, "Be still and know that I am God." Thank you for listening.